to just share with how amazing you are and what you can do in people's lives. And so, yeah, with no further ado, I just wanted to share. I've got about half an hour, I think, of sharing. So what my life was like before Christ revealed himself to me and what's going on in my walk with the Lord now. So just go back to start with my childhood, really. Yeah, so I was like, I've got an older sister, a younger brother. So there's three of us siblings, my mum and dad. And you know, looking back now, I mean, I blame my parents for a lot of stuff, because we did grow up in dysfunction. But you know, looking back, I mean, they met all of our physical needs. You know, looking back now, they did the best with what they knew how to do. But growing up, you know, my dad was a hard-working man. He had his own building business, and my mum, you know, she was a stay-at-home mum, and she was devoted to us in terms of she met all of our physical needs. You know, so we were the children that, you know, because my dad had his own business, there was, you know, quite a bit of money in the home, so we had a nice home. You know, we didn't go without, like, we had all the latest toys. And so a lot of the kids up our road, you know, they used to like want to come to our house and play with our toys. So we was quite privileged in that respect. But what was lacking was, you know, my mum, as I understand now, my mum and dad, they was raised in dysfunction. They was raised in brokenness, you know, and without knowing Christ, the source of love. A lot of people are just trying to do the best that they can do in this life. But so they didn't really have anything emotionally to give me, my brothers and sisters. You know, I don't remember ever being encouraged, being given praise, being shown healthy love. My dad, you know, although he was a hard-working man, I suppose what comes with a building trade is, you know, they'll go out to the pubs after work and, you know, have a pint. But my dad, you know, he used to just drink, and he would turn aggressive, he would turn violent, especially when he drank whiskey. You know, if he was on the beer, it would be okay, it wouldn't be so bad. But if he went over to whiskey, he would turn violent. You know, it was like it wasn't my dad anymore. And so growing up, I regularly witnessed a lot of domestic violence. You know, there was times, you know, my dad would come home from the pub and we'd just be really scared. I grew up with a lot of fear in the house. I learned to be quite hyper vigilant of, you know, not knowing what was going to come home to. My dad was very controlling. You know, he's an old school dad. My dad's 83 years old. You know, he's a Scotsman. And my mum, you know, in a way kind of protected my dad, because to her that was love. You know, she grew up, her mum was quite abusive, and to her, she got put in a children's home. So to her, I guess that was her concept of love. So yeah, me and my brother and sisters, you know, we used to fight and argue a lot. The house was just very divided. So I grew up, and I really believe that a lot of my problems came from the household that I grew up. So this resentment and this anger and this bitterness and this pain was just growing in me from a young age. But I didn't yet know that I had this illness called the disease of addiction, which I'll come to later. But I always felt separated. I always felt different. I always felt rejected. I always felt deeply insecure and troubled. And that was going on in me from as young back as I can remember. So yeah, in the end, you know, I witnessed so much violence from my dad towards my mum. And there was this the last sort of violent episode. I think I was around 16 or 17, and it was really bad. I remember it really clearly, like on a and that happened. And then my mum decided she had to leave, you know, to save her life, because, you know, one of them would have killed each other. And so my mum just up and left. You know, she moved in with her, she found a new partner, which was her boss at work, you know, and she moved in with him. And my dad decided to sell up and move back to Scotland, took my brother. So from a young age, I've come from this very controlled environment, fearful environment, to now having to fend for myself, because my mum moved in with her partner. My dad went to Scotland, and you know, I had a lot of fear around my dad, so I wasn't going to move with him. So I moved in with a friend. And then from that, yeah, so from a young age, I learned that there was no one to depend on. I didn't have that family support structure that I knew that I could fall back on. So I had this insatiable drive. Although I had this low self-esteem, I also had this drive that I needed to make it in life, and there was no one that was going to be there for me. And so yeah, I had to push myself. Whereas my brother and sister, bless them, they kind of, I guess something inside them, I read up about this, like how you can have two siblings come from the same home, and one can kind of excel in life and one can kind of give up, you know, and not even start life. And they kind of gave up, and they you know, went down the path of drugs and alcohol. I now know that they have this illness as well, this disease of addiction. But for me, I was like, no, I'm gonna make it in life. And I sort of moved in with a friend. And it's funny because looking back, I moved into a friend who lives in a pub. Her family owned a pub, and I used to think she was so cool. Looking back, I used to be so addicted to the fruit machines. You know, I wasn't addicted, even though it was a pub, they sold alcohol. I didn't yet know that drugs and alcohol was going to play a big part of my life, and get me in a chokehold later in life. But I didn't really even drink alcohol, you know, but I was very addicted to the fruit machines. I just used to love them. It was the ones that used to put the tokens in. So at night when the pub would close, we just used to like get all the tokens and just play on that for hours. So I did have like addictive tendencies. I knew my personality, you know, was quite addictive in nature. Everything I did, I didn't do by halves. It was all or nothing, you know, in everything that I put my mind to. And so yeah, I moved around from place to place, and I think it got to about 18, and you know, I was so broken. I moved in with another friend, and I remember this pain of rejection and this suffering, and that was when I guess I wanted my family's attention, you know. I didn't and I did take my first attempt at suicide, but I don't really think, looking back, I think it was more of a cry for help. You know, I had this desire in me that I just needed attention. I needed someone to know the pain that I was in. And I took loads of paracetamol, and you know, it got me a lot of attention. I don't think, like I said, I don't think I actually wanted to end my life, although I did take a load, and then called my friends' parents, told them what I'd done, and they just made me be sick to get it all up. And you know, even then, you know, telling my mum and dad, it kind of felt like that was it. I didn't get the desired effect that I wanted. You know, I really thought that would be them, you know, professing their love for me, and that they would come and get me and they would take me with them, and that didn't happen. And so yeah, I just sort of moved on in my journey. I got my first little office job, and at this time, the boss's son, you know, he used to smoke weed, and I started getting into weed. I started to enjoy it, you know. We started to go out on our lunch breaks, and I liked the feeling of getting high. I liked the pain that it took away. I liked feeling that, yeah, just that feeling of, you know, it made me laugh. It made me feel quite giggly and excited, and that got hold of me pretty quickly. So weed played a big part of my life, you know. Well, for 10 years I was in addiction to weed. 10 years, you know. But I liked the isolating. You know, I eventually got my uncle had a council flat. I moved in there, and then I started studying accountancy, and I thought, right, I didn't even enjoy it. You know, I didn't even feel I had a natural talent towards accountancy. I was never that good at maths, but you know, I didn't have anyone to kind of help me, to guide me, to even, I didn't even know what I was good at. I was going out with this guy. He was quite driven, and looking back, I think I was looking for almost like a father figure, because I had that desire in me that I just wanted someone to guide me, someone to nurture me. So I was attracted at first to people that had wisdom and that I could learn from. I knew I was very hungry to learn, and I started, you know, I went into accountancy, started studying for that, and that was 6 years of study, you know, and I really pushed myself, and I worked so hard, you know, whilst going to work full time, doing this accountancy. you know, looking back, I think God was in my life, you know, because to even get through that with the level of like brokenness and distress and smoking weed, you know, I believe God was in my life looking back, you know. But I went through a lot of trouble in my workplaces, you know. I always thought that because I had this low self-esteem and this crippling low self-esteem, almost like a paranoia from the weed, you know. I didn't know how to do relationships with people, chronic people pleaser. I was super sensitive, like, to any form of criticism, and I just remember, like, I lived with this chronic fear every day, you know. So whilst I'm striving to achieve, like, I need to prove to the world and prove to myself and prove to my parents that I'm going to be somebody, you know. If I can just get success in terms of worldly standards, you know, maybe this career and earning good money is what's going to excuse me, give me safety and security. But with that striving, I had this, like, you know, this poor character, basically, this internal spiritual malady, which I didn't know I was suffering from, where I was prone to misery and depression, prone to low self-esteem, paranoia. And so I couldn't do relationships, you know. And I think in 3 of the corporate jobs that I was working at, I had trouble in every single job. And I believed, like the victim mentality, I was thinking, why is everyone out to get me? I just felt like I couldn't catch a break anywhere. The world was out to get me. And I didn't know, maybe looking back, I still don't know to this day. Christ hasn't really revealed it. Maybe it was the enemy. Like, I sometimes question, was it because I was under a curse at the time, or was it because that was Jesus in my life, but he was bringing me to the path of complete brokenness so that I may find him, so that he may reveal himself to me and I'll be ready when he calls me. I don't actually know the answer to this. I do question it quite a lot, like, why did I have to go through that? But then maybe I was the making of my own misery, you know, as well, because I chose to go down that darker path of taking drugs. And so going through all that pain in the workplace, like, I remember. But then whilst, you know, and I did have one job, I did have a bullying boss, yeah, and he made my life misery. But one thing I know about me is that when people come up against me, I believe Christ was with me, because I still had this drive to not sort of back down and shy away. Although I have a lot of fear, it's really weird. It's like a split personality. Whilst I'm crippled with fear of what man thinks of me, it's like, if you come up against me and I feel I've been done wrong, I'm going to fight you with everything that I've got, you know, because I don't also like to lose. And so I was striving to, like, you know, I went as far to take this company to a tribunal. You know, I was like, I'm not going to, you know, because I've worked so hard for my qualification, I'm now not going to, you know, be kind of stifled by a bullying boss. This is what happened in one of the companies. And so I was fighting tooth and nail. You know, it felt like I came up against this company, you know. But in the end, it made me really, really, really sick. It made me really poorly. I had to go on mental health medication, and my drug taking then progressed to cocaine and alcohol. You know, I started going out at the weekend, especially after I got my qualification. I kind of didn't have anything to strive for, because one thing about me is I need routine, I need structure. That's what helps my mental health. I need to know what I'm doing day to day, and how kind of try and have a bit of a time schedule to it. Otherwise, if left to my own devices, I'm just like, you know, I can make reckless decisions, very impulsive. And so, yeah, I just, you know, was going out, mixing with the wrong people, started taking cocaine, and that was my downfall. You know, it started to get to the point where I didn't trust anyone. I got into a relationship. That relationship, the guy was everything I was looking for. Then there was abuse involved there. You know, but at this time, because I was earning a good salary, I was able to purchase my own home finally, and I got that security. You know, I was living with the partner at the time, so I managed to get that security, so I didn't have to, like, move around place to place. I stayed in a lot of rented places. And that was amazing, you know, that was absolutely amazing. But 6 months into buying the own home, my partner of 5 years, he just said, look, I don't love you anymore, and I know I shouldn't have jumped to this, rush to this step. I don't see me proposing to you, I don't see me settling down with you. And he up and left, and it was almost like it was like a death, because he just went, you know, it just was overnight, he just went. And I've never really seen or spoke to him that much since. He had to buy me out, and luckily I've just gone from the job that I was telling you about where I was being bullied. I left there. I didn't take it any further. I was preparing to go through to tribunal anyway. I just dropped it all because I got offered a new job up in the city, and my salary went up by like £10,000 because I was qualified now. So I was like able to get my property. I was able to buy him out. And it was during that time, I think I was at that job for about 3 years, but my the drug taking just increased, you know. And it was like I didn't know I had this disease of addiction. So I just and it's a disease of insanity, right? Because if I've strived and worked for something for 6 years and I've given my all, and I mean I sacrificed a lot to get that qualification, you know. At the time, when friends were going out, I was there studying, going to college on Saturdays. But I did like to come home and smoke weed and whatnot. But there was a time throughout that I was able to put it down. You know, there was a period of time I had a power of choice, you know. But when I moved on to cocaine, I started to lose that power of choice. You know, I started to, you know, I was going out with the people from work. But I just used to feel crippled with low self-esteem. Whilst I didn't feel I deserved, I didn't even ever feel that I was a chartered accountant, yeah, because I got the letters after my name, but the low self-esteem was growing, and every day I lived in fear. I just felt, how am I going to do this job? Am I clever enough? I couldn't even, it was like, it wasn't me attached to my body, you know. I don't know, I know that might sound weird to people, but it was like someone else was living my life. I didn't really feel attached to my own body. I was in chronic fear, and I was like doing all this research, like what's wrong with me, Googling, buying all these self-help books. I knew something was really wrong. I was looking up imposter syndrome, you know, the psychology world. I was like, that's what I've got, where you feel crippling fear that you're going to be found out. And you know, every day I was like, I'm going to get sacked. The paranoia was growing. Every time my boss called a meeting, I was like on edge, thinking, that's it, they're going to sack me. So to combat all that way I was feeling, all I could do was come home, take more drink and drugs to block out what's going on in my head, you know, because my head was just going crazy. And yeah, in the end, I eventually had a major breakdown, yeah, in that job. I remember like leaving that job. I just got on the train one day, came home, sorry, let's go back. Before I ended up having the breakdown, they said they had private health insurance. So I used the health insurance and I started having counselling sessions, because you was allowed to do that anonymously. You know, you can use the services. Started going for counselling. Every time I would speak to a counsellor, I'd be so scared and embarrassed to tell people how I felt or what's really going on, you know, because the enemy, what he likes to do is make you feel that you're the only one going through what you're going through. He really heightens that in your mind, that you can't tell anyone, you're the only one that's like that is off key and like not normal. And that's, you know, the enemy, looking back, that's how I know now, when the enemy was really working in my life, he really had that hold over me. And so when I was going to the counselling sessions, I would have to take cocaine just to try and get what I thought was a little bit of confidence. And she was the first person that told me, she was like, I think you're an addict. And I remember hearing those words, and, you know, I was just like, no way, I'm not an addict. Like, I wasn't using every day. I wasn't, you know, I just thought about people out on the park bench like bums, you know what I mean? And I was like, no, I've got a job, I've got a house, you know, this is just what people do. This is what I see my friends even doing. And that was kind of my journey to being told I had this disease called addiction, which addiction isn't even about the drink and drugs. You know, it's about it's this spiritual malady, disconnect. So it's just, yeah, an internal malady going on inside me, so prone to all of these things. Can't do relationship, personality disorder. Basically, my personality is was grotesquely disordered, you know, very maladjusted to life. So yeah, I ended up being told that I had this illness of addiction. I couldn't really stop using. That's when she first recommended I go to the rooms of Cocaine Anonymous, start this 12-step program. Anyway, I ended up leaving the job. I ended up going on sick leave for about 5 months. Couldn't go back. I was just beaten down, just chronic depression. The depression grew and grew, and I ended up using their health insurance. I went into the Priory. I was in there for three weeks. Ended up coming out of the Priory, and then ended up they actually made me redundant, right? And I got paid a considerable amount of money for redundancy, and looking back, I kind of blew that money. I blew that money. I was really unwell. I was really impulsive. This is how reckless I was. I just didn't know what I was doing. I went up London and I spent like nearly £3,000 on face creams. So I was just gone in my mind, like I was gone. I just was doing crazy, reckless things. And I ended up going to the rooms of CA. That's when they started telling me, pray to a God of your understanding. You suffer from a serious spiritual illness where only the power of God can relieve you from. And I didn't really take it seriously. I didn't, it was just all weird to me. I didn't really grasp it. No one there, hardly anyone there knew that the power was Jesus. It was almost like a taboo, like, okay, we're being told that God is the power that can save us, but no one really wants to mention God, because if you've got a lot of people coming from the world of addiction, it's almost like a bit of embarrassment, isn't it, to say the word God, in the room. So a lot of people were calling it your higher power, and people were making up their own conception of what that higher power is. I certainly never even acknowledged that it could be Jesus, because I grew up, even though I went to Catholic primary school, looking back, I was in the Jesus nativity play. I had to play a sheep, and I never would have known that was actually real. You just thought it was some sort of nursery rhyme or a story. It never actually knew that this was real, or the significance, of that. And so even though I did go to a Catholic primary school, I wasn't raised in a godly way. My parents never taught me anything like that, about God or Jesus. So I was in and out of those rooms of CA like a yo-yo. I was off work now. I couldn't go back to work. I basically was off work. I haven't ever pretty much gone back to my career since 2015. That was kind of the breaking point of that career at the time. I was now in and out of the rooms like a yo-yo, didn't know who God was, getting sicker and sicker, kept relapsing. I'd get periods of clean time, maybe 30 days, 60 days. I think the longest I had was 7 months. Then started doing more reckless things, hanging out with people that I shouldn't have. Now, just hooking up with any guy that would, trying to look for love. Sorry, guys, my son is just coming in. I was praying he wouldn't interrupt, because I've got my little toddler. It was just, okay, wait there. I was just, giving my body to guys, sleeping with guys, trying to find love, getting sicker and sicker. And then what happened was how Jesus revealed himself. Okay, baby, go there. Okay, go there. See, sit there, good boy. What happened was a lady in the room. A lady in the rooms of recovery gave me a leaflet for Alpha. Alpha is a Christian. Sorry about this, guys. I'm not sure what I can do to. Come on, we'll get your book. Here. Sorry, guys. About this. Here. Over them. Good boy. A lady in the room of recovery. He gave me a leaflet on Alpha, which is the Christian course. It's got Bear Grylls who advertises it, and it's like the foundation course into Christianity. And I know this was at the start of Jesus starting to call me and reveal himself to me, because up to that point, like I said, I didn't know who Christ was. I didn't know what God I was praying to. And I did have another suicide attempt. I had this binge on drugs and alcohol, and something was just telling me, sorry if this triggers anyone, but just to put a scarf around my neck and just to hang myself. And, you know, as I did it, it snapped, and the bit of the ceiling, because I did it anyway. I did it off a light, which was probably a really blonde thing to do, but the light just come crashing down, and it was just, I can't even emphasize the darkness I was in. Like, I was so beaten down with depression, I couldn't even. My curtains were always drawn. I wouldn't come out of my house. I remember having to crawl up the stairs because I don't know if anyone's ever had serious depression, but you're just drained of every life source, every bit of energy. I was literally crawling up my stairs because I couldn't even physically walk anymore. That's how beaten down I was, and I just didn't see any way out at all. And one day when I just remember the leaflet that the lady gave me about Alpha, and it talked about Jesus, and I read a bit, and this was a week before Easter 2016, and I was in my bedroom, and you know, in the recovery program there's a step 3 prayer, which is the surrender prayer, where we basically make our surrender. We surrender to God, and we say, our will be done, and we invite God in. And I've done that prayer many times throughout recovery, but I don't think I truly was ready in my heart. And also I was never praying to the true God, which is Jesus Christ. I didn't know who it was. This time I thought, well, let me pray to this Jesus, you know, and I cried out from the depths of my heart, you know, and I just cried, and I just said, you know, I remember it clear as day, the words. I just said, Jesus, if you're real, please reveal yourself to me. Please help me. Forgive me of my ignorance. I know nothing about the cross, not something to do with you dying and being raised from the dead. And I just cried out, and you know, at that moment something happened to me. Like I felt the presence of, I just felt, which I now know was the Holy Spirit, just descended on me like a dove, and something happened. It was like an external force of love just engulfed me, and I just broke down, and all these tears I was just pouring out, crying. And it was almost like I felt chains fall from me, and that chronic depression, it was like it just kind of went away in that moment, right? It lifted off of me, and I was just crying. And then I couldn't deny, and even today I can never deny what happened, you know, like Paul talks about. Come on, Jack. Go get Maxie. You go get Maxie. Paul on the road to Damascus. Be a good boy. Be a good boy. Yeah, Paul on the road to Damascus, you know, when Jesus revealed himself, and it was as profound as that for me. And that week, I was able, the depression had kind of lifted, and I was able to, you know, when I drew back my curtains. Sorry guys, I'm just thinking where I just walk around. I drew back my curtains, and it was like, the only way I can describe it right is the whole of creation. It was like creation came alive for the first time. You know, I used to walk around and everything looked black and white, but this time I saw color. I could hear the birds, you know, I could hear the birds, and it's just amazing. I think it talks about in Colossians that he rescued us from the dominion of darkness, you know, and the kingdom of darkness. And that's what happened to me, and creation became alive. It was like I could just see and hear everything so vividly. The world looked colourful, and I ended up going up to my local high street, and there was some people singing gospel on the street, and I just think, wow, I just had this encounter with Jesus. I went up, spoke to the people. The pastor there was telling me how he used to be addicted to weed and everything. Anyway, they invited me to come to their church, and I went back to recovery. This was on the Saturday before Easter 2016. They said to me, some of them are being baptized at the church the following day. So they said, come along. And I thought, yeah, I'll come along. I hadn't really been in a church since I was a child, and I used to go to the Catholic primary school. So I went to the church with them. And so I did, apart from recovery people, I didn't really have any other, like my other friends or family there. And I didn't know that was the day I was going to be baptized off the cuff, you know. And the pastor said at the end, because they had the baptism pool, they said because they had these planned baptisms, everyone that was booked in had theirs. And then he said, if anyone wants to give their lives to Christ, wants to be baptized, then let's take a minute. If you feel hearing the call of God and you feel to do it, then raise your hand. And like, you know, I was really like, part of me was conflicted because I still had this insecurity, you know, I had this insecurity to like go up in front of people, didn't have any like of my sort of personal friends or family there, but I just felt this fire inside me that was just like burning, like, you have to do this, you know. And I raised my hand, and there was 3 people that day that raised their hands. I think there's about the congregation of 200 people, and funnily enough, there's no coincidences with God, they had purchased 3 tracksuits in small, medium or large, because obviously the people who raised their hands like didn't know they were going to be fully immersed in water that day. So they purchased, I suppose they said they thought maybe they'll get one, so they bought a tracksuit in small, medium and large, and the 3 of us that went up, we all fit the tracksuit perfectly, the small, medium and large. It was a smaller girl, I was the medium, and then there was a man. So I mean, God's just amazing, you know, that was meant to happen. And I'd love to say that since that day, you know, I've just sort of sailed off into the sunset with the Lord, and everything's been great. But yeah, so, you know, God revealed himself in a powerful way. And, you know, looking back then, I was really hungry and I was on fire. And I was, but what I did was, when I went back to the rooms of recovery to tell them what had happened to me, you know, I'd had this radical encounter with Jesus. At the time, the guy who was sponsoring me, he just turned on me. He was like, we don't deal with religion here. It was like, you know, when it says Satan blinds the eyes of the people, the scales are on their eyes. It was like no one was willing to hear about this miraculous testimony. They was just, you know, the enemy, or the world, the spirit of the world, which is Satan, had blinded them. And, you know, my sponsor was like, you know, I'm going to have to let you go because, you know, we don't deal with religion here. I'm not into religion. I shared my testimony at a recovery meeting, and I felt like they wanted to like lynch me, you know, because the enemy was working through them. You know, the enemy had started to infiltrate the rooms of the addiction recovery, because people were choosing their own concept of God, and if it's not Jesus, you know, it's the enemy, isn't it? And so I said, you know what, I'm suffered so much rejection through my life. I'm leaving the rooms of recovery. I've got Jesus. I've got my new God. I'm going to just concentrate on going to church and church alone. But I had all this mental illness still, you know, in me. And the church I was at, God bless them, you know, looking back, I suppose, I don't know, I'm not say they were legalistic, but they wasn't legal. They just, I don't think they knew how to handle me. You know, I'd come along and I was suffering with a lot of mental illness, and sorry guys, come on. I was suffering a lot of mental illness, and I was just full of fire for God, you know. I was just hungry for God. I was doing some radical things at the time, like and I remember, just to give another quick testimony. Sorry about this, guys. I'm just trying to keep him, put cartoons on. Okay. My uncle, right? Sorry to just jump about, but just wanted to share this. You know, when you first had your radical, I don't know if anyone can testify, but when you've had a radical encounter with Jesus, you know, you can be so on fire and be like that little child, isn't it? And I kind of knew, wow, like, you know, heaven, and like there's a heaven and earth, and you know, people go to hell if they die, and there's devils, there's a devil, there's God, there's angels, there's all of this was so like crazy to me. It felt like I was in a sci-fi movie, you know. I was just like, oh my gosh, I just couldn't believe it. And so I'm just conscious of time. So and then my uncle, who had suffered serious schizophrenia, you know, he was bound for years, you know, and in the demonic oppression. This paranoia, schizophrenia, runs through my family bloodline. So I know this is something that I've been fighting. And you know, when I was new in my faith, he caught pneumonia, and they said he was going to pass away. And I just remember like being so radical in my faith back then when I got saved. And I went rushing to the hospital, and I was just praying that God would, because he was crazy, couldn't even, you know, he was gone in the mind. And I was thinking, how am I even going to preach the word how am I going to preach the gospel to him? he won't even understand it, you know. But I had to pray that God would make a way. And as I got there, I was in the intensive care unit. I managed to, we had a conversation. He was kind of listening in. He was all like tubes up to him. And I sort of told him the gospel, and he ended up holding my hand and saying the salvation prayer, although he kind of mumbled it because he wasn't really coherent in his speaking. And then the nurse came in to clean him up, and her name was Christabel, but it's spelled Christ Abel. I mean, some of the stuff I've seen God do, you know, is incredible, right? And anyway, he passed away, and then I was really scared, and I said, God, show me if he has made it into heaven. You know, the enemy likes to, like, you know, bash your mind and make you doubt. I was like, oh, did he really mean it from the heart? And Christ showed up at the funeral. And yeah, when his coffin was on the altar, and all my family are there, right, and they're all sort of atheists or unsaved. And the priest, I spoke to the priest when we were doing the funeral arrangements, and I told him that, he said, did he have a faith or religion? And I said, well, he received Jesus. He said, do you want to do some reading from the Bible, you know, at the funeral? And I said, yes. So I read some from the book of John, where it talks about, you know, Thomas said, what's the way to you? And he said, you know, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. He said, how can I know where I'm going? So I read that, and I had to stand up in front of all my family, right, and read some of this. And they were all, some of them were a bit, you know, looking at me with funny looks, because especially my auntie, because that's her brother, and to her knowledge, he wasn't a religious or man of faith. And I was so nervous, you know. But these are some of the things that I was doing back then. Like, I was just radical, and I was seeing God. But then what happens is, then as you start to progress in your walk with Christ, you know, I believe he takes you from when you're a baby in Christ, and you're like really protected, and there isn't so much there wasn't that much attacks and that coming on me, although I was suffering a lot with my mental health. And then as I'm starting to walk with him, you know, he starts to grow you up, you know, and he starts to allow you to start partaking in like warfare, and the battles are coming. And yeah, it just really convicted me, you know, when you were sharing at the beginning, Ivor, about that. For me, I want to get back to that place where I was really on fire, and I was believing God for the miraculous. I was stepping out, you know, in boldness. And since then, I think because the level of warfare and persecutions and attacks, I can kind of retreat. I think I've been in a place where I've been more a place of retreat recently. So that just reminded me that I just want to get back to that place. But yeah, as I've been walking with Jesus, I'd love to say that, you know, I heeded to what he said, don't go back to sin and sin no more. But it's a period of sanctification, isn't it? And a bit like Hosea's wife, you know, she had Hosea who loved her faithfully, but she was so used to that lifestyle of running back to destruction. And that's what I did. You know, I still kept having relapses on the drugs and alcohol. Whilst I loved God and was walking with him, you know, I was at the church I was at, you know, we was regularly confessing our sins. I was regularly at the altar, breaking down, crying all the time. I was, you know, but I'd left the rooms of recovery, right? So I thought I could do it just going to church and with Jesus. And I got sicker and sicker, you know, I kept relapsing. And I ended up in a night of madness with someone that I kind of knew him. I ended up sleeping with this guy, and I 6 weeks later I saw that I was pregnant, and like, obviously I was terrified, you know, and I was just crying. I was like, God, no. But part of me was kind of like, well, I'm 37 as well, and I didn't ever think that, not that I was even trying, I didn't even think about pregnancy or marriage, because I was so broken and just coming from that life of you know, not knowing love. And then I'm battling now with, I know God loves me, but I've got I've got this character that's still riddled with like, you know, misery, depression, insecurity. So I'm now in a fight for my life to kind of tear down these strongholds, you know, and I've got to be relentless in my pursuit of doing that and clinging to God. But I still had that impulsiveness. So yeah, ran back, make reckless decisions, ended up pregnant. And, you know, even through that pregnancy, right, God's faithfulness, God was telling me, you're going to have this child. And I believe in God's grace and his wisdom, he allowed me to have this child to give me a real reason to fight and to live and to show me what unconditional love really is. Now the dad's not really involved. He is, you know, he's spiritually sick. He's still in that lifestyle doing what he's doing. That's been another battle that I've had to take on. I've had to find a lot of acceptance around that, because he does sometimes pop up on the scene from time to time, and I'm learning about boundaries. I'm learning, God, you know, how to handle these situations with wisdom. But you know, even through that, I wasn't able to what happened was, just when I found out I was pregnant, I was thinking, how am I going to financially do this? You know, because what's happened now is I had to go on to benefits, right? So I have my mortgage, everything. I wasn't able to work since 2015. Wasn't able to get back to that level of accountancy because of how unwell I was mentally, and I was on, you know, in the rooms of recovery to learn about the illness. And I ended up, when I fell pregnant, the Lord led me to get a job. Yeah. And I had some debts to clear in that, and I ended up getting a job as an accountant for the first time. But then I don't know, maybe it was deception from my part. I didn't tell them I was pregnant. I waited till I got into the job. I don't know if I was ever meant to take that, but my fear had me, you know, scared. I was thinking, how am I going to get money together for the child? So I was trying to prepare for when my child was born. And the same pattern happened again, you know, problems with people. Plus they kind of outed me when I told them I was pregnant. Of course, naturally they was angry. They was upset because they'd paid this company a fee, you know, these recruiting companies. And, you know, I'd gone there, and then after 3 months telling them I'm pregnant, they was angry, you know, but I was protected by the law and everything, and I ended up having a terrible time there. I was the last one always working there during my pregnancy. They were really being horrible to me. I used to come home crying, and I got through that. You know, they didn't keep me on at the end of my 6-month probation, and because I believe God led me, again, being the warrior that I am, to come up against them, like, you know, because it was pregnancy discrimination. I mean, they treated me terribly. Like, I was the last one in the office. They were piling more and more work on me, because what their plan was we're not going to let her pass her 6-month probation, and that will be, you know, a way to get me out. And so I had to do all that. And, you know, God in his faithfulness, I won some compensation from them. You know, I had to go for a hell of a lot, won some compensation, which was going to help towards, you know, preparing for my son. My mum lives opposite me. Me and my mum have always had this, because where I bought my property, my mum lives opposite where she lives with her partner that she left when she broke up with my dad. We've always had a very bad relationship, you know. Mum doesn't show love in the way that I need, and it's just, God's doing a restoration there. And my son has been the pivotal sort of change in my family that's going to bring unity. You know, he's certainly showing me what love is, and but it's been tough, you know, because I've had to leave behind like my career and what I worked for, and really trust God, because I've had to stay on benefits, right? And it's like, how do you, and I'm not, no disrespect to anyone on benefits, thank God we're in a country, do you know what I mean, that we get this assistance, because there's other countries out there, there's no help like that, you know. So I'm really grateful for state help. And how I've still managed to keep my home, and I've never lacked, and I don't know how God's done it. Do you know what I mean? Me and my son, I might not have what I want, but all my needs have been met. The way God has orchestrated things, like there's Christian charities that I'm involved with where I get food banks from, and it's not, I'm not as destitute as that. Obviously the food banks, they help, you know. There's one Christian food bank that I get Waitrose food. I mean, even if I was on money, I probably wouldn't be shopping at Waitrose because it's too expensive, you know. So God, you know, he doesn't let his children you know, scrimp and scrape. I don't believe that, you know. And so yeah, my son has started to change my life, but I'd love to say that I stay clean and sober. There was periods of relapse early on in my son's life, and that's when God said to me, you have this illness of disease of addiction and you need to go back to the rooms of recovery. But I didn't go back to the mainstream rooms where, you know, they are seeking a God of their own understanding. He put me in this specific ministry. I've been coming here to Faith Walk. I've been in another ministry where I'm going through the 12-step program, right? And the 12-step program is basically to surrender your life to God and to start working systematically through, like, clearing out. So you're working on any unforgiveness, any bitterness, and you're going back and you're making amends to anyone you've harmed throughout your life. And then I'm taking inventory. So every day I'm looking at, because, you know, when we're looking at what's the character of God, you know, we're looking at the fruits of the Spirit, and that's what we are. That's who we're trying to become. We're trying to let the Spirit change us, yeah, to become more like Christ. So we need to become patient, tolerant, loving. You know, love is long suffering. So all praying for those who persecute us. But when you've got a personality as should I say, as what's the word, as it's just as dysfunctional, I say, as mine was, you know, I had these strongholds in my mind. So I'm now coming from one end of the spectrum, I've got to get to the other. So I have to have a process in which to deal with this stuff. I suffered a lot of delusion in my mind. So where I'm always looking outward and was in victim mentality, I'm always looking at what people have done to me and justifying my behavior back, like how I would react back, very reactive, you know, in my emotions. Now, where I've got this sponsor now, she's a born again believer. She's 10 years clean and sober. We're working for it, and it's hard, you know, this working the steps. It's a daily commitment, but it's like daily I'm picking up my cross and I'm dying to self. And every day I have to take stock and look at my behaviors, look at where I was selfish, look at where, like, I'm watching my thought life now, you know, and then I'm confessing this stuff on a daily basis to God, and I'm asking him to uproot it out of me, you know. And this is where the change has really started to happen. It's really started to happen. You know, I'm 6 months coming up back clean and sober, but this time because I had a slip, you know, which I'm not proud of, you know. And it's so, that's the danger for me. If I don't work this stuff, if I don't, you know, keep walking this narrow path with Christ, and I'm watching my behaviors, I can easily go back to that. You know, some people, they come to Christ and they just seem to like walk off in freedom. But with me, I do feel like I have to almost, I'm clawing my way through, you know, like just really, trying to overcome day by day. And, you know, I would be coming up to 2 years also celibate, like taking it deadly serious, you know, and fleeing from all sexual sin, understanding, you know, when God started to chastise me for things that I was running back to, it was God's love and mercy that he was pouring out on me, right, to show me that I love you so much, you don't have to go back to that way of life. And every time I've fallen or I've gone back to a taste of that old lifestyle in any way, it's like now I get chastised by God, you know, and he's shown me that, okay, you know, I'm going to love you. And he's pulled me back out of the pit, but there's been that chastisement, you know, and now it's come to the point where God's pulled me out so many times, the love and respect I have for him and the love that he's shown me, it's like, I don't want to go back and do these things. I don't want to go against you. You know, there's a purpose on my life that I need to take deadly serious, you know, and I don't want to go back, you know, and I take my walk deadly serious now. And I'm not saying that I might go back and do something. I really pray to God I don't, you know, but I'm pushing with everything I've got, and God's love and faithfulness, you know, he just keeps me. And it says here, doesn't it, in Isaiah, and one of the scriptures that I really cling to in Isaiah 41:10, it says, don't be afraid, for I am with you. Don't be discouraged, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will hold you with my victorious right hand. And I have to remind myself every day, because I'm in a bit of a period now where my son is 2 and 4 months and he's just got into nursery. He gets some government funded hours. And now I'm at this, I feel like I'm coming into a new season where it's like, okay, God, where am I going? Am I ever going to go back to accountancy? Because I just feel like my passion is lost, even though I studied for all those years. To be honest, I've probably still got trauma and low self-esteem around that career because of what happened to me. And I'm just having to trust God. You know, I'm like, where am I going? How am I going to get out of you know, maybe come out of the benefits system, get back into work and still manage being a mum? I honestly, there's times when I think, how am I going to do this? But I have to trust that the same God that's brought me this far is going to continue, you know, to take me the rest of the journey. And it says, doesn't it, don't lean on your own understandings, but in all ways, sorry, my alarm's going off, in all ways acknowledge me and I will make your path straight. And yeah, so that's where I'm at in my journey today. And I'm just grateful, you know, I'm so grateful to be connected to like faith walks. You know, I know for me, I have to be around believers every day. Like I'm on a Zoom meeting or I'm on prayer line. I'm on this stuff every day, because left one day to my own devices or one day away from, you know, pressing in, my thinking and my mind can act up. And so yeah, I need to keep on this narrow path. And yeah, to anyone out there who doubts God's love, you know, doubts his power, he's such an amazing God. Like he loves us so much, you know. And there's no situation, there's nothing that's impossible for God. And I know this in all of my heart, you know. So anyone that feels discouraged, or maybe the enemy's got into your mind, and because I still suffer today with intimacy, you know, I do. One day I can have such a beautiful day with God. The next day I'm in my mind thinking, oh, I've done something wrong. God doesn't love me. And it's just the enemy, you know, it's my own condemnation. And yeah, so I just pray that you'll all know the love of God, and that we press in, you know, like never before. And he's got so much work for us to do for his kingdom. There's so many people attached to our obedience, you know, and he will bring us through. He will bring us through. He's a faithful God. Even when we're unfaithful, he's faithful. So I just thank you. I hope somebody got something out of my testimony, and sorry for the distractions with my son. Thank you for the grace, guys. God bless you.